Yo, Robert Ferringo with Doc Sports, here with your Hump Day hero, Nolan Patrick of Strike Point Sports. Be sure to check us out at www.docsports.com. That's docsports.com. Nolan, we're talking NBA basketball. It's playoff time, buddy. This is the big money, high stakes, high intensity time. So my first question to you before we get into breaking down Wednesday's games are, how do you approach the playoffs differently than the regular season? What would you say is the number one thing that you would tell a novice or square bettor that they need to adjust in their betting style in the postseason?
One of the big things about the NBA is you really have to watch the playoffs. I think you get a lot of novice bettors during the regular season that just look at lines, they look at the spreads, they look at the standings online, and they say, ooh, here's a team in first place playing a team in sixth place. I've got the line that I want, and then they try to attack it that way. In the playoffs, it's very, very important that you watch the game, that you see how teams played, and then you get a much better feel for really how the games are going to go. And the other thing, too, is there's fewer games each night, so Vegas is on point with the lines. So it's not really about trying to catch Vegas off. It's about watching games to really get a good feel.
Okay, one of the games that I watched over the weekend for a considerable amount that I thought was a little bit closer than the final score suggested was the Washington-Philadelphia game. That kicks off or tips off Wednesday's action. I thought that Philadelphia did a good job of keeping Washington at arm's length for most of that game. But really in the last 5 minutes of that game, Washington had a couple turnovers on back-to-back possessions that let Philadelphia extend the lead, where if they had executed or just made a few shots closer to the basket, they really could have put a scare into Philadelphia. What's your take on this matchup?
It's a really interesting matchup because you've got Philadelphia, who's one of the best home teams in the NBA. They just dominate on their home floor, and they're pretty bad on the road. Washington, on the other hand, is one of the hottest teams coming into the playoffs. They were, I think they're 7-0-1 against the spread in their last 8 games following a straight-up loss, 6-0 against the spread in their last 6 games as an underdog. I mean, they were dominant against the books. And if you really took a long, hard look at that game, for 3 quarters, that was about a 1-point basketball game. I believe Philly outscored Washington maybe 38-31, something like that in the third quarter. Otherwise, for 3 quarters, that was a 1-point game. I have a feeling that Philly wins this series in 5, but I could also see Philly only covering 1 of 5 games. So I think there's a ton of value on Washington against the spread in this series. But if I was making a series prediction, I would look to take Philly. And right now, there's some good money on the 76ers to win this series in 5 games at plus 160.
Solid. Yeah, Washington is 20-7 against the spread in their last 27 games. They're 18-8 against the spread on their last 20 games. But to your point, Philadelphia has been one of the most dominant home teams in the NBA this year. They're 30-13 straight up, 8-3 against the spread in their last 11 home games. Looking at game 2, is this a stay-away game? Washington lost, but did cover in the first game. Now, we saw that in another Eastern Conference series with Miami at Milwaukee, and then in game 2, Milwaukee just laid the wood. Do you see a similar effort from Philadelphia in this game? Do you think that this one could be a runaway, or do you think that Washington maybe makes 1 or 2 of those plays that they didn't make in game 1 and keeps it close again in game 2?
I feel like I'd be away from the side. I'm not a big fan of the side here. If I had to, if you pretty much looked at me and said, you need to make a side play, it would absolutely be on Philadelphia in game 2. I like the over. If I was going to go on this game, I would take the total and I would take the over. I think both teams are going to score in game 2. I would stay away from the side, but if I had to take one, it would be the 76ers at home.
Okay, so it's kind of fate, little kismet that Atlanta ended up matching up in the first round series. Anyone that's watched these videos know that the Knicks are your team. Okay, you have been your favorite team since you were young, so you always kind of are cued into what's going on with the Knicks. And the Hawks have been your sleeper team all year. All right, so these are 2 teams that you were very, very high on. You were on the Knicks well before the public realized how good this team actually was. And you've been riding Atlanta through, like most of us have, through the second half of the season. They played a fantastic game in game. And, to digress for a second, anyone that's not familiar with the zigzag of playoff betting. It suggests that, especially early in series, whoever wins or covers in game one, you go against them in game two. Then you do the same thing in game three. You just kind of bounce back and forth. Now, do you feel like this sets up as a good game and that you're looking for New York to bounce back in game two after losing a heartbreaker in game one?
I do. I'm not a big proponent of the zigzag theory. I never really have been. The zigzag theory is a type of theory that can be profitable for you if you take a money line, but against the spread since the 2002 season, the zigzag theory of going against the team that covers the first time is 559, 538, and 12. That's only good for a 51% winning percentage. So I'm not a big fan of the zigzag theory. However, in this series in particular, I do like the Knicks to bounce back in game two, all of my fandom aside.
Now, in game one, a lot of the talk afterwards was about Trae Young. He hit the game-winning shot. He was big down the stretch. He was finally getting himself to the free throw line where he does a lot of his damage in the fourth quarter after not taking a free throw in the first three quarters. But honestly, watching that game, I felt it was the Knicks didn't do than what Atlanta did. Julius Randle had a MVP caliber, first team All-NBA caliber season this year for the Knicks, which no one saw coming. Okay, he should be on the All-NBA first or second team with how he performed and carried this team. However, he was awful in that game. He was absolutely pathetic for all four quarters, and especially down the stretch. I really felt like if Julius Randle had done absolutely anything in that game, Trae Young wouldn't have had an opportunity to play the hero. So do you think Randle's going to bounce back? Do you think that really he's been playing over his head for most of the season and that things are kind of catching up with him? What do you think about this matchup there, Young versus Randle? And what are your expectations in game two for both of them?
I think Trae Young has another good game. I really do. I think that was a big spot for him to play well. 15,000 people in the Garden. And I read an article after that game that said that people are looking for that new Garden villain. Now, is Trae Young going to become Reggie Miller? No, absolutely not. He's not going to be the Garden villain like that. But I think he could relish that kind of role for the Atlanta Hawks. Do I see Julius Randle bouncing back? Absolutely. We've all played basketball. We've all watched basketball enough to know sometimes you just have a bad game. And Julius Randle did. He shot the ball poorly. I think he really forced his game when things weren't going well for him. I think he should have tried to go to the basket a little bit more to try to get to the free throw line to get his game going. If the old adage is if you're missing a lot of jump shots, go to the rim and get yourself an easy one to try to get your game going. And I think Randle should have done that. I really see Randle bouncing back. A lot of people said, well, don't worry about it because Burks had, 26? That covered up for what Randle did. If anybody watched the last three games of the regular season for the Knicks, Burks averaged 20 points a game in those last three games of the regular season. So that wasn't an anomaly. The Knicks bench has been pretty solid with Derrick Rose and Alec Burks off the bench. I really see Julius Randle bouncing back. I like the Knicks in this spot, although I do see Trae Young having another big game for the Hawks, but I like the Knicks with the small favorite.
Yeah, honestly, just my gut feeling watching that game is that I felt like the Knicks, it actually worked against them having fans in the Garden. You thought it would go the other way, right? You thought that the emotion of having the crowd there, of having that energy, of having big-time basketball back in Madison Square Garden would lift this team, which has been riding a cloud, really, especially over the last month. They had that West Coast road trip where they played so well, won some close games down the stretch. I honestly felt like it worked against it. I felt like Randle in particular and the Knicks really kind of shrunk from the moment. Like it was too much for them. Like they didn't know how to handle all the focus and attention being on them. So that's going to be something to watch as the series moves forward, is how they react to that Garden crowd. Now, the Knicks are 7-1 against the spread in their last 8 meetings with the Atlanta Hawks. They match up very well with them. The public likes the Knicks in this game. Once again, it opened as a pick and has immediately been bet up to the Knicks -2. Are the Knicks getting a little overvalued by the general public right now, do you think? Or do you think, again, that they just didn't play well in game one, but they are the better team in this series? They are the higher ranked team for a reason.
I mean, I think anytime you get a New York City team, especially the New York Knicks, I mean, I'm a perfect example of somebody that's just been fiending for the Knicks to be good again, to be in the playoffs, because that's what the NBA wants. That's what the people want. They want to see a good, solid basketball game in the Garden. But if you watch that game, because we were actually talking a lot during this game, that late three that Bogdanovich hit for the Hawks, that Trae Young penetrated, got caught under the rim, kicked the ball out to his right. RJ Barrett had that in his hands as he was falling out of bounds, dropped it, then it was caught, shot fake, three-point basket. If Barrett steals that, I think you're looking at the Knicks winning that game by 7 to 8 points once you start playing the free throw. And now you're talking about how the Knicks are probably a 3.5 point favorite in game 2, possibly going up 2-0, going to Atlanta, against a young Hawks team. So I don't think they're overvalued. I think they were one dropped basketball away from winning about a 7-point game in game 1. So I think the line is where it should be. I think the fact that it's gotten bet up is where it should be. The Knicks should be the favorite. And again, I do, all fandom aside, believe they cover here in game 2.
All right, third game, the nightcap, another potential zigzag opportunity, if you do believe in such things, all of Nolan's statistics aside, is Memphis at Utah. Now, I was all over Memphis in game 1. Loved the line, loved the line. I did not think Memphis was going to win that game. I absolutely knew that they were not going to get blown out of that game. And I was expecting Donovan Mitchell to play. What are your thoughts about this? Are you expecting a bounce back here from Utah? That line is still around 8.5. So the expectation is that Utah is not only going to bounce back with a win, but they're going to bounce back and win pretty convincingly. Memphis has been on a pretty good roll. They're 10-2 in their last 12 games. They're 7-3 against the spread in their last 10 games in Utah. So they're one of the few teams that has not gotten run off the court in Salt Lake City. What are your expectations out of the Jazz in game 2?
Donovan Mitchell was not happy that he was a late scratch in game 1. There was a really good article that I read out of a Utah newspaper that really talked about how disappointed he was. He's ready to go. He is. And when Donovan Mitchell plays, the Jazz, we're the best team in basketball. And remember, we talked about it many, many times. They went through a stretch where they just ran every single team out of the gym. And I really like Utah to bounce back. This is a zigzag theory that I like. Actually, in the zigzag theory, a home team off a loss covers it almost 53% of the time. They're 316, 287, and 9 since 2002. And actually, just on a straight money line bet, which would be tough in this situation because the line actually at some books is all the way up to 9. But a home team off a loss wins nearly 62% of the time since 2002 in game 2. I do like the Jazz to bounce back. I think that this is the double-digit win that you're going to see out of the Jazz. I like Utah in game 2.
Is Donovan Mitchell going to make that big of an impact and that immediate of an impact? He has not played since April 16th. Okay, right. And he's thrust right into the heat of a playoff series. Not only a playoff series, but a playoff series where Utah is facing a must-win game early in the series. Can't go down 0-2 when both of those losses are coming on your home court. Are you expecting him to be the Donovan Mitchell superstar guy right off the bat?
No, I'm not. I absolutely don't think he's going to drop 35 points in game 2. But I think him being back is going to give that Utah Jazz team the boost that they need. I think it gets Jordan Clarkson back into the role that he wants to be in. He just won 6th Man of the Year. I think that gets him back into his role. I think Donovan Mitchell's I was going to say Donovan McNabb for all you Syracuse fans out there. Donovan Mitchell, I think with his penetration, the way he plays, I think it's going to make the game easier for Joe Ingles. I think it's going to make the game easier for Rudy Gobert. And really, I think it changes the way that Memphis is going to have to go about their defensive game plan, just knowing he's there. Because whether he's 100% healthy or not, he's one of the better players in the NBA, and you've got to change what you do defensively. There's no doubt about it. So I think he's going to absolutely have an impact. A superstar impact? No, but good enough to win this game by double figures.
I definitely am expecting him to be 100%, but I agree with you. I don't think he's going to come in and drop 38 points and just carry this team on his back. Now, you mentioned McNabb and Syracuse. Something about this series made me think of college basketball. Actually, we've seen this before in the NCAA, where teams that play in that first 4 game and win are often a little bit more prepared when the field of 64, when they get in that first round game, and they can be prone for an upset. Okay. And by then they have a little bit of that momentum. We've seen teams make runs to the Sweet 16, make runs to the Final Four, starting out of the play-in tournament. Do you feel like that is the case with Memphis? Because that was part of the reason I like them getting the 9 points in game 1, is that they had already had a chance to knock off the rust, to get those playoff jitters out of themselves. Now they have a little bit of momentum. They've won 3 games in a row. They're feeling good about themselves. The public is behind them. They have the most important factor in postseason betting, and that is momentum. Should we just keep riding the Grizzlies here, or should we flip the other way and look for Utah to bounce back?
I wouldn't be able to blame anybody that jumped on the Memphis Grizzlies bandwagon. I really wouldn't. Like you said, they've got a lot of momentum. They have these young players that just don't care. They just play basketball. They will go at you. So they have a much better offense than those old grindhouse Memphis Grizzlies team that we used to see with Mike Conley and Mark Gasol. They have a much better offense. They're a lot more dynamic on that side of the basketball. And I couldn't blame you if you stayed with Memphis. Like you just said, the first 4 game in college basketball, you see it in a lot of sports. You see it in the NFL. The team that wins that wild card game all of a sudden goes to the NFC or AFC championship. Go New York Giants. But I just don't like it. I just don't like them here in game 2. Do I think that the Grizzlies give the Jazz a series? I absolutely do. I wouldn't be surprised to see this go 6 games, but I don't like the Grizzlies in game 2. I do like the Jazz.
Me personally, I would love to see the Grizzlies cover the spread in a close loss in game 2. I think that would set up some tremendous value on Utah going back to Memphis in game 3.
Yeah.
I think that would shorten that line a little bit. That's what I'm looking for. All right, Nolan, I can't let you out of here without giving the folks something for free. So you got a free pick for Wednesday's action?
I do. And you want to hear me say the Knicks, but I will not do that. I won't do that to the public. You know that I'll be on my couch wearing my Knicks gear. I'll be sitting right over there watching the Knicks play the Hawks.
Your little Knicks footy pajama with your little John Starks and doing stuffed animals. Yeah.
Oh, I was just parading around this house late in that game. But I like the over. I like the over in Washington and Philly in game 2. I think you're going to see a lot of points there. I think you are going to see Washington give Philly a go. In the end, I think Philly is going to win and possibly cover, very similar to game 1, but I think you're going to see a lot of points there. So I would take over Washington and Philly in that first game tomorrow night.
All right, folks, there you have it. He's Nolan Patrick. I'm Robert Ferringo. We both work for Doc Sports, the #1 sports handicapping outfit in the industry. 50 years in business. www.docsports.com. We will see you next week. In the meantime, carpe diem and good luck.